Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Carmine's Arena, a cultural gourmet of information, if you will, a feast for your mind and soul. And now, without further delay, the man, the myth, the maestro, Carmine Arena.
Greetings and welcome once again to Carmine's Arena, site of contest and conflict, venue for and of resolution. Resolution in terms of focus, remedy, and commitment, both yours and mine, to the preservation, the propagation, and the celebration of Western civilization. In this, my 92nd episode of Carmine's Arena, we'll be revisiting our world of the new normal, Part 2. Listen now to my rhyme with its well-nigh proper time. The new normal at best is downright disgust for anything formal. At its worst, at accursed lust for anything immoral. Going postal, bi-coastal, is the crowded, boastful route to endow the now and disavow the slightest hint of anything highbrow. Those considered real cool pool to become a political tool, and like children drool over any unschooled darn fool whose novel opinions come to rule. Such be our triumphal abnormal, become today's new normal, groomed and perfumed by yesterday's vices become today's fashions, defended and festooned behind barbed leftist bastions, ever in action against new normal, looming doom and its ultimate contraction, which can't be too soon for my satisfaction. Now, in part one segment of my account about new normal syndrome, I suggested as remedy the disciplines, the dynamics, and the rigors of the fine arts as opposed to mere artifice, which of course is sheer cleverness, impersonating genuine genius, an example of smug attitude, pretending aptitude. I confess that I too thought art something from the imagination alone, something apart from reality. Now, I've come to know it to be reality so profound that it is often missed, because it resides in the soul of who it is we are, whose prehistoric core we don't wish nor crave to probe, since it requires our loving vigilance. Yet all too sadly, all too rashly, we've grown love-shorn and lazy, all too multitask busy, going real crazy. The selfish trumping the self, an ego which prefers things hazy. Excuse me. Thomas Mann, in his 1924 masterpiece entitled The Magic Mountain, gives the following ominous warning, which sums up our decadent, declining, diseased culture directly unto many more mad new normal tomorrows. And I quote, "The mystery and the precept of our age is not liberation and the development of the ego. What our age needs, what it demands, what it will create for itself is terror." Unquote. Yes, that is one of literature's most visionary moments, which long in advance sensed the looming calamity of Nazi Germany well before Hitler's rise, while that germinating force of Holocaust evil to come was merely daydreaming of the tactics ahead of the terror that was to take over Europe and the world right up to the painfully recent Boston Marathon massacre, which for leftist sensibilities dare not speak its name. Yet it's been and is terror, 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 mankind's great grave error in our terror-filled era. And those unwilling to tag it terror are made more of wishbone than backbone. I'm sure you've run into those goody-good clones. Yuck. Another profound and gifted thinker was the German philosopher Nietzsche, who even earlier than his fellow countryman, Thomas Mann, grew to understand that error about life is necessary for life. I unfortunately must sadly agree, grasping the full tragic irony in the observation. For I myself have for decades made personal error, however unwillingly, a companion, keeping the rascal close so that I learn error's quirks, salesmanship, and deceptive seductions, each of error's twists and turns to tether an ever newer normal. Yuck, and I repeat, yuck. It never ceases to amaze me how free people end by imitating each other right up to and off the proverbial ungated cliff, taking with them their only evidence of permanence, their trendy sleeve-length tattoos, that addiction for inky artifice colorfully parading about as communal art, hankering after self-identity. Quite personally, I thank God every day for giving me the spine to resist peer group influences back to my musically inspired youth. A youth trained and motivated by individuation, not collective herd branding. That cranky consistency leading to partisan party opinion. Deaf, dumb, and blind to the creepy hobgoblins of the all-too-narrow mind. Firmly holding such stubborn consistency to place and purpose requires a damaged, diminished perspective worthy of criminals who heinously hold hostage the random found, in short, the blameless, the all too blameless. In this episode, in this particular, I cite the blighted legions of innocent children who are slated to come into the world with a job, and that job is to solve today's all-too-solvable problems, problems facing today's Congress, otherwise paralyzed by the hobgoblins of consistency. These closet cowards, these yellow-bellied buck-passers and can-kickers who themselves deserve a solid national kick in their collective cans. Pretending endless compassion, these cowards employ mere lip service on behalf of the helpless and needy, most especially children. Well, the lip service, the goody-good spiel, is a crock of political pianky-dank, for we now have and live and abide in the American nightmare of the nanny namby-pamby state, which in reality means to assault our exceptionalism, so that it will end in a benign tyranny. The first stages of the inevitable examples which haunt history. Thereafter, what all too soon and suddenly takes front and center is malignant, full-blown tyranny, which rarely surrenders bloodlessly. Small wonder that if man wishes to progress, he may only do so by looking carefully at the past. Small wonder then that when our forefathers gathered to design an emblematic seal for the United States of America, they turned to the book of Exodus, where God helps an entire people free themselves from Pharaoh. The figure of Moses was strongly advocated and even designed for what was to have been the official seal of the country. It is to be especially noted that none other than Thomas Jefferson appropriated the motto on said seal, which is a clarion ultra-American declaration. Rebellion against tyrants is obedience to God. In the great scam that pretends that government plantation is a benign haven, allow me to quote a contemporary black conservative thinker, Thomas Sowell, S-O-W-E-L-L, Sowell, and I quote, "In the modern welfare state, a vote becomes licensed to take what others create, and these others include generations yet unborn," unquote. Ah, yes, there we have again innocence born with a job. Where then is the art become so cynically ugly, which accepts that we saddle our descendants with a fiscal plague biblical in size and scale? Where then is the fine art which is the proper task of life? For life without labor is guilt, but labor without art is brutality. As we learned in my last episode of Carmine's Arena, John Adams hoped and prayed and labored to make America one day an artistic society, educated to the degree that grasps the following. Listen carefully. To know anything well involves a profound sensation of ignorance. This insight prompts one to become endlessly teachable, not a stick-in-the-mud secular progressive troglodyte with a degree, or a dropout who'll surrender freedom for stuff, that fluff of infamy. Our new normal thinks to throw billions at public education, yet half of all undergraduates in the United States arrive on campus needing remedial work before they can begin regular classes. That early detour can be costly, leading many to fail, and often in heavy debt, and with diminished prospects of finding a job. Obviously, you are what you think or don't think, just as much as you are what you eat or don't eat. Recently, we saw the scandal still unfolding of the Atlanta school system headed by a Philistine who browbeats teachers. Teachers forensically proved with latex gloves on, gathered by selection to correct the many wrong answers on standardized tests. After a while, the amended results became an inflated statistical absurdity no amount of latex could hide. How clearly different becomes the concept between schooling and education. Schooling today becomes leaning, unlike education, which is learning. We dreamed in America in one-room schoolhouses. Now we've added school cafeterias, which build quivering flab at breakfast, lunch, and soon extended dinner time to accommodate all too busy parents. Parents who, like their offspring, are curiously in multitasking modes of thought, where they can't resist the dumb lure of doing 2 or 3 things at once. These multitaskers are the dupes of irrelevancy. Mesh together irrelevancy and subterfuge, and you arrive full tilt at an understanding of new normal. These do-goody, good school administrators don't get that they are in possession and possessed by the ignorance of the learned. Those who don't understand that you cannot dream yourself into an education any more than you can dream yourself into a sound character. One must hammer and forge these on one's own with the aid, perhaps, of an enlightened, gifted teacher who knows the difference between thought and indoctrination. The new normal screwballs don't understand, nor do they wish to, that there is all the difference in the world between treating people equally and attempting to make them equal. In short, there's nothing more unequal than the equal treatment of unequals. That phenomenon invariably deserts equity while boasting of equality. To again quote the black conservative thinker Thomas Sowell, here's what he so keenly observed. Those who say that all cultures are equal never explain why the result of those cultures are so grossly unequal. Yes, the statement is not politically correct. Excuse me, my allergy. It's not politically correct, but nonetheless, it's the proper diagnosis. Moving along, fast forward. What the stunted and grunting new normal folks don't grasp is simply simple economics. They don't see that capitalism did not create poverty. It inherited it. The new normal folk believe we're dumber than they ever could be, and thus won't notice that when plunder by entitlement spending becomes a way of life, men create a legal system that authorizes it and a social code that glorifies it. Allow me to give you a case in point. The Danes of Europe are beginning to rethink a welfare state that's become grossly ample to a fault. Case in point, a 36-year-old single mother had more money to spend than many of Denmark's full-time workers. All told, she was receiving about $2,700 a month and had been on welfare since she was 16 years old. Her position is, why work? Why work indeed when you can remain a permanent adolescent on a big allowance? Danes are beginning to realize that there is something rotten in Denmark. The work ethic has been seriously undermined, for the very few are supporting the all too many. Thus, Denmark has become its own victim of the new normal. Many retire at 45, and thus this happy nation of cradle-to-grave security is suffering a malaise and indifference resembling a herd of cows. So much for their grazing on political rhetoric, leading to theirs and Europe's collapse. It was so much better for the Danes when they were engaged in making well-baked pastries rather than half-baked political treats. It was so much better when Europeans strove for the highbrow for themselves and their children, instead of the lowbrow industry of new normal subterfuge and its ominous irrelevancy. Let us all engage in retrieving true relevancy with an eye to posterity, which our children shall inhabit. I raise this issue because of a shared concern held by the thoughtful in my audience who write to me, writing about their chagrin and shock as they view our age's consistent contempt for children, who can be slaughtered and scraped away from the ironically lawless country of the womb. This cruel and repetitive act, justified and fortified by feminists who forgot what it means to be loved and to love. Feminists, a cadre of cagey demagogues who don't desire mere equality, let alone equity, but who now, hear this, don't want you to dare open a door for them, yet smugly expect that you will. So you'd better. Moreover, as I speak, there is an active ongoing investigation into the botched abortions leading to the unintended birth of an infant ready for its mother's sentence to let live or to suffer infanticide. This topic, this scenario, is revolting and revelatory of how far secular progressives have crushed native femininity into the political mush called reproductive rights of women, whose legitimate rights were surrendered to a fling as prelude to their ill-conceived conceiving. My strong conviction is that a heightened perception must ever prevail over mindless, careless conception co-sponsored by a mere man who wins twice, once as a deadbeat daddy, later as a paid abortionist. So much for being liberated from male domination. Yuck. And to think abortion is legal. Hear now from the great Russian writer and famous political prisoner, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who stunned the Harvard academic community by these unwelcome words, uttered in a commencement address, and I quote, "I have all my life lived under a communist regime, and I will tell you that a society without any objective legal scale is a terrible one indeed. But," and here's the rub, "but," he goes on, "a society with no other scale but the legal one is not quite worthy of man either. Consequently, what doesn't arrive from out a rich moral soil, however legal, becomes a pervasive, invasive weed which chokes and smothers culture and the best fruits of man's better angels." True enough, we have developed an obsessive aversion to moral law in a bargain basement rush to seize wholesale-priced new normal rights, cut-and-paste rights, whose advocates don't mind the thumb on the scale of justice, provided the fat thumb is there and is their own. Not to mention blindfolded Lady Justice who plays peekaboo so as to kiss new normal boo-boos for certifiable cuckoos. These rapacious rights, when granted, often deny children of their moral right to claim mommy, because without their permission, children are born, when allowed to be born with a job to validate mommy's job while swiftly warehoused to daycare, providing salaries for strangers who at best have a collective concern for these tykes, but not a personal, individual, and undivided maternal concern. However, the new normal contempt for children, which parades benign neglect as the enlightened emancipation of children, has an obverse side to its newly minted splintered coin, and that is the side of overindulgence lavished on homemade brats who are granted adult privilege so long as they keep these little strutting nuisances from allowing busy parents to live independently on 2 salaries required for mommy's and daddy's new normal, mismanaged lifestyle. These overweaned, overlavished tweeners and teeners are children who no longer joyously play and roll about in the dirt, but are committed to becoming so much the darkened debris of cyber junk and cyberpunk funk, the computer age's compacted incompetence, parent approved. Now the new normal, knee-jerk chutzpah, demands same-sex marriage. Domestic civil partnership is not nearly sufficient for these arrested emotional adolescents, arrested unto permanence of their condition, who cling self-righteously to co-opt the word marriage itself. Might I remind their legal experts, X being an unknown quantity and spurt a big drip, that love is the marriage of true minds and true bodies capable of procreating without outside agency. Thus there occurs minimum vice if vice versa, as opposed to same old, however dressed for the occasion, however loud the bells, however loud the swelling of the organ and the coming of the ungroomed bride. Well, I'm out of time. Yes, I have to wrap up. And it appears there's still much more to be said about the new normal. A lot more, in fact. Till next time, and part 3, I invite you quite seriously to keep the faith.
If you have any comments or other remarks, and that I perhaps could even read on some of these broadcasts, please do not hesitate to write to me, Carmine Arena, P.O. Box 1029, Larchmont, New York 10538.